Hello there. Thanks for stopping by Max's Cards and Dice Dugout. This is episode 96, and we are continuing the 1991 stock car project using Downey Games Fast Action Racing. It's race number 15. We are at Daytona, returning to Daytona for the second race at this track this season. And before we set the field and talk about the race itself, let's take a look at the standings. You can see rookie Bobby Hamilton is still in the lead. The top 10 finishes, he has 10 of them in 15 races. That consistent performance has placed him there. Davey Allison is still trailing him. Although he has cut the gap by 3 points, he was 12 behind before Michigan. And the rest of the top 10, Harry Gant, Rusty Wallace, Ricky Rudd, Alan Kowicki, Chad Little, Ernie Irvin, Sterling Marlin, and Bill Elliott. And we continue to keep an eye on Dale Earnhardt since he was the Cup champion in 1991, and he seems to be stuck in 14th place. He has been there for the last 3 races. Okay, so we are back at Daytona, 2.5 mile triangular shaped oval for the Pepsi 400. That's what this race was known as on July 6, 1991. On that day, Sterling Marlin was the pole sitter, and Bill Elliott won the race, which was his only win of the season. Also notable about this race, racing fans may remember that Joe Rootman and Darrell Waltrip got tangled up on the back straightaway, and they both went into the infield, and that was that multiple violent flipping of Darrell Waltrip's car. I remember watching it when it happened, and the car was totally destroyed. Somehow he walked away with that, or walked away from that, with only minor injuries. Oh, one other thing I should mention, here at Daytona, both contact and mechanical checks get a +1, so it is slightly less for either one of those issues to happen here than it is at some other tracks. And I should also mention that this game, which is released and produced by Downey Games, was created by Phil Riviere. Phil and I have been in contact with each other off and on in the recent past, and Phil's working on a new auto racing game, and I've been fortunate enough to do some play testing on it. It looks like a lot of fun. I do not have any dates on release, when and how he's going to release that, but if I do get any information, I will pass it on. All right, so we will set the field here. First thing would be to give these cards a shuffle. Another user that commented, a YouTube subscriber that commented on my video, said that I ought to consider using a dice tower. I do have one. My play area is kind of on the smaller side, and it tended to cramp things up, but I'm going to try using it again today. I think this setup will work okay. So the first thing we're going to do is shuffle the driver cards and give them a cut and set the field. And as I always mention, this grid is not a representation of positions on the track, but rather a abstracted close-up view of different areas of action during the course of a race. All right, shuffle these a few more times, give them a cut, and we will set the field for the Pepsi 400 here at Daytona International Speedway. We are essentially halfway through the season. All right, good enough. So give them a cut and set the field. Got Lake Speed, Derek Cope, Kyle Petty, Stanley Smith, Mickey Gibbs, Jimmy Spencer, Richard Petty, Joe Rootman, Morgan Shepherd, Ken Schrader, Michael Waltrip, Davey Allison, Alan Kowicki, Dale Earnhardt, Harry Gant, Chad Little, Larry Pearson, Rick Mast, Rep Bodine, Terry Labonte, Jeff Bodine, Darrell Waltrip, Ted Musgrave, Ricky Rudd, Jimmy Means, Dave Marcus, Rick Wilson, Bill Elliott, Hut Strickland, Ernie Irvin, Dale Jarrett, Bobby Hillen Jr., Bobby Hamilton, points leader and rookie, Rusty Wallace, Sterling Marlin, and Mark Martin. As always, a lot of bookkeeping, paperwork with this game. I will be doing that off camera, but it does slow me down just a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is find out who our pulse hitter is. We will roll the white and red dice, reading the white die first. And we got a 33. So we're looking for the pulse hitter ratings. We're looking for a 33. It's Rusty Wallace. He has, I think this might be his third pull. So we'll use this green die as our leader marker and make our first entry here on the sheet. And it's Rusty Wallace. Okay, so he is going to face a challenge here actually at the start of phase 1 of the race. And we select that randomly. And that challenge is coming from 66, Rick Mast. Okay, and we're looking at the green race rating. Mast is a 9, Rusty Wallace is an 11, but for this initial challenge against the pulse hitter, he gets a +1. That makes him a 12. So this challenge is at a -3, and Rick Mast needs a 10 or 12, and he gets an 11. So Rick Mast challenges Rusty Wallace and takes the lead. So that's a pass, and Rick Mast is the race leader. Okay, first phase is a mechanical check. Select the driver randomly and 4 adjacent drivers, and we will be looking at the red mechanical rating. This can include the leader, and it's a 46, and it's going to be Davey Allison. His 12 o'clock wraps around down to Bill Elliott. His 3 o'clock is Bobby Hamilton. His 6 o'clock is Ernie Irvin. And his 9 o'clock, is Rick Wilson. All right, so we are going to roll the black die and check the red mechanical rating. If it's equal to it, there is some mechanical problem for the driver. He comes in, gets some repairs done, probably is behind the wall, comes back out, and it's going to be several laps down. If it is greater, he is forced to retire. Now remember, we are a +1 here. So the first check is against Davey Allison. He's a 9. That makes him a 10. He needs a 9 or less. He rolls a 4 and is successful. Passes. Next check is Bill Elliott. He is a 9, becomes a 10. He needs a 9 or less. He rolls a 6. He passes. Bobby Hamilton. Hamilton is an 8. He becomes a 9. He needs an 8 or less. Sorry about that. He rolls a 4. He's successful. Ernie Irvin. Irvin is a 10. He becomes an 11. He needs a 10 or less. Bad luck for Ernie Irvin. He rolls a 12, has some serious mechanical issue, and he's not coming back out. So Irvin fails. Did not finish. And Rick Wilson is the last check. He's a 7. He becomes an 8. He needs a 7 or less. He rolls an 8, and he is also forced to retire. due to some mechanical issues. Now, that is not one event. These happened sometime during the race, and kind of on the early side. So that's another failure. Did not finish. And Rick Mast remains the race leader. Okay, and he's going to face a challenge at the end of this phase, and that is coming from 13, Derek Cope. Derek Cope, who right now is sitting in last place in the standings. All right, we're looking at the green race rating. Mast is a 9, Cope is a 7. This challenge is at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12 to be successful. He rolls a 6 and fails. And Rick Mast remains the race leader. All right, now we have a phase of green flag racing. We're in phase 2. So we're going to select a random driver for Jason, and they will go up against the leader using the quality pass matrix. So that driver is going to be 35, Morgan Shepherd. His 12 o'clock is King Richard Petty. His 3 o'clock is Harry Gant. 6 o'clock, Dave Marcus. And his 9 o'clock is Ricky Rudd. All right, so we use the green race rating. Look at the quality pass matrix. And first challenge is coming from Morgan Shepherd. He's an 11, Mast is a 9. Shepherd's challenging at a +2. He needs a 5 to 12. He rolls a 5. And Morgan Shepherd is the new leader. So it's a pass. And Shepherd is the leader. Okay, so now Morgan Shepherd's going to face a challenge from Richard Petty. Shepherd's an 11, Teddy's an 8, challenging at a -3. Petty needs a 10 to 12. He rolls an 8, fails. Morgan Shepherd remains the race leader. Next is Harry Gant. They're both 11, so this challenge is at a 0. Gant needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 12, and Harry Gant takes the lead. Pass, and Gant's the new leader during this green flag racing period. He's going to face a challenge from Dave Marcus, who is a 6. Harry Gant's an 11. That's a -5. That is an automatic failure. But Marcus remains on the lead lap, and Gant remains the leader. Final check coming from Ricky Rudd. Rudd and Gant are both 11, so this challenge is at a 0. Rudd needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 4 and fails, and Harry Gant is still the race leader. Now, also occurring during this green flag racing, there was some green flag pit stops, so we're going to do a check on that. And once again, they'll be going up against the leader after we pick a random driver. We use the quality pass matrix. However, on this check, we are looking at the blue pit crew rating. So that challenge is coming from 24, Mickey Gibbs. So it's Gibbs. His 12 is Ricky Rudd. His 3 is Dave Marcus. His 6 is Ted Musgrave. And his 9 o'clock is Terry Labonte. Okay, so we're looking at the blue pit crew rating. Harry Gant is a 9. Mickey Gibbs is a 7, so this challenge is at a -2. Gibbs needs a 9 to 12. He rolls a 5. I don't know if you can see that because of the shadow. I know I need to get some better light, but he rolls a 5 and fails. So Harry Gant remains the race leader. Next check is Ricky Rudd. He is a 9. Gant is a 9. This is a 0 check. Rudd needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 3 and fails. Harry Gant is still the race leader. Now it's Dave Marcus. Marcus is a 7. Gant's a 9. This is at a -2. Marcus needs a 9 to 12. Rolls a 7 and fails. So Harry Gant's holding them all off during these pit stops. Next is Ted Musgrave. He's holding them all off so far. Musgrave is an 8, Gant's a 9. Checks at a -1. He needs an 8 to 12. Rolls a 3 and fails. Gant's still the leader. And finally, Terry Labonte. He's a 7, Gant's a 9. Check at a -2. Labonte needs a 9 to 12. And he gets it. He gets a 10. And after the green flag pit stops, Terry Labonte is the new race leader. Okay, now we're going to, the second part of phase 3 is to see if there were any infractions. It's a penalty check. See if there were any infractions during the pit stops. And we do that randomly and 4 adjacent drivers, and we'll be looking at the pit crew rating for our checks. And let me do that again. It's a 34, so it'll be Dave Marcus. So it's Marcus. Morgan Shepherd is his 12 o'clock. Excuse me, Michael Waltrip is his 3. Joe Rootman is his 6. Excuse me again, and Mickey Gibbs is his 9. All right, so we're looking at the blue pit crew rating again. If the die is lower or equal, no infraction. If it's higher, he goes down 1 lap. We don't have any yellow or red lap drivers yet. So he needs to be equal to his pit crew rating, and that's actually Dave Marcus that we're checking first. He's a 7. He needs a 7 or less. He rolls a 6 and he passes. If you fail this check, you've had some sort of infraction and we're sent back in for a stop and go. Okay, the next one is Morgan Shepherd. He's an 8, needs an 8 or less. Morgan Shepherd rolls a 12, so something happened on pit row for him. He's told to come back in. He fails and gets a green lap marker. He's 1 lap down. Michael Waltrip is next. He's an 8, needs an 8 or less. And he rolls an 8. Passes. Joe Rootman. Rootman is an 8 also, needs an 8 or less. Rolls a 7, he's good. And finally, Mickey Gibbs. Gibbs is a 7, needs a 7 or less. Rolls a 6. So the only one who had an infraction was Morgan Shepherd. So they all passed. And Terry Labonte, who could have been part of this, remains the race leader. Now, here between phases 3 and 4, there are 2 consecutive challenges. And that first one is coming from 53, Dale Earnhardt. Okay, we're looking at the green race rating. Earnhardt's an 11, Labonte's a 10, so he's challenging at a +1. He needs a 6 to 12. Rolls a 3 and fails. Labonte remains the leader. And we'll immediately face another challenge as we head into phase 4. And that's coming from 23, Ted Musgrave, one of the other rookies. I would always say that Hamilton and Musgrave are the 2 rookies, but I believe Stanley Smith is also a rookie this year. But anyway, this challenge is coming from Ted Musgrave. And he is an 8. Terry Labonte's a 10, so he's challenging at a -2. He needs a 9 to 12. And he rolls an 11, and we have a new race leader in Ted Musgrave. So Musgrave passes, and he's got the lead. Okay, so phase 4 is a contact check. We're going to be looking at the yellow contact avoidance rating. And just like mechanical checks, contact gets a +1. So we will select a random driver. And 4 adjacents and look at their yellow contact avoidance rating. So it's going to be 36. 36 isn't there. So we'll roll again. And it's 54. It's going to be Bobby Hillen Jr. Okay, his 12 is Harry Gant. Larry Pearson is his 3. Dale Earnhardt is his 6. And Michael Waltrip is his 9. Okay, so we're looking at the yellow rating. Gets a +1 here. You need to be lower than it. If you're equal to that rate, if the die roll is equal to that rating, you get a yellow lap marker. You were involved in some contact, came in, but were able to get back out. If you are higher than your rating, you are forced to retire. Okay, so the first check is Bobby Hillen Jr. He's an 11. He becomes a 12. He needs an 11 or less. He rolls a 5, passes. Next is Harry Gant. He's a 9. He becomes a 10. He needs a 9 or less. He rolls a 9 and just avoids contact, so he also passes. Next is Larry Pearson. And Pearson is a 4, becomes a 5. He needs a 4 or less. He rolls a 9 and is forced to retire. Larry Pearson is the 3rd driver out of the race. So he's failed. DNF. Okay, Dale Earnhardt. He's an 11, becomes a 12. He needs an 11 or less. Rolls a 3, he passes. And finally is Michael Waltrip. He's a 9, becomes a 10, needs a 9 or less. Rolls a 4. Passes. And Ted Musgrave remains the race leader. Now we are going to have another series of pit stops. And these are conducted under caution. And these are going to be checks looking at the pit crew rating and using the quality pass matrix going up against the leader. And the random driver selected will be 52, Dale Jarrett. So it's Jarrett. His 12 is Dale Earnhardt. His 3 is Chad Little. His 6 is Alan Kulwicki. And his 9 is Ken Schrader. All right, so we are looking at the blue pit crew rating using the quality pass matrix, and all of these drivers are going up against the leader, Ted Musgrave. So this is pit stop under caution. All right, so the first check is going to be Dale Jarrett. Jarrett's a 5, Musgrave is a 10. Dale Jarrett must not have a very good pit crew. He fails at a -5. So it's a failure. Ted Musgrave is still the race leader. Okay, Dale Earnhardt is an 11. Not an 11. He's a 10. Musgrave is an 8. Hold on a second. I looked at the wrong number. We're looking at the pit crew rating on Dale Jarrett. He did not fail. We don't know if he did yet. He's a 7. Musgrave's an 8. I apologize about that. So he's a -1. Jarrett needs an 8 to 12 and rolls a 7, so he does fail. Okay, next check. Dale Earnhardt. He's a 10. Musgrave is an 8. He's challenging at a +2. He needs a 5 to 12. Rolls a 10 and takes the lead. So Earnhardt passes. And he has the lead. Now Chad Little's check will come against Dale Earnhardt. And Chad Little's a 7, Earnhardt's a 10. He's challenging at a -3. He needs a 10 to 12. And he rolls a 10 and takes the lead during these pit stops. So it's a pass, takes the lead. So he'll be going up against Alan Kulwicki, who is an 8. Chad Little's a 7. Kulwicki's challenging at a +1. Leads a 6-12. Rolls a 9. He takes the lead. So this is all happening during pit stops. And finally, Ken Schrader, 8. Kulwicki's an 8. Challenges at 0. He needs a 7-12. He rolls a 5 and fails. Alan Kulwicki is the new race leader after all of these pit stops are completed. So it's Kulwicki. And he's going to face a challenge. And that challenge is coming from 12, Brett Bodine. All right. Bodine's a 9. Kulwicki's an 11. He's challenging at a -2. He needs a 9-12 to take the lead. He rolls an 8 and fails. Alan Kulwicki remains the race leader. All right, so now we're into the closing lap phases. The first thing we're going to do is check and see if there's a mechanical check. If there is, this will be against the leader only, Alan Kulwicki. So here at Daytona, a mechanical event happens on a roll of 8-12, or a second mechanical event, I should say, or a mechanical check. So we need an 8-12. We roll a 9, so that's a yes. So that's going to be a yes. And we are just looking at Alan Kulwicki's mechanical rating. No other drivers are going to be checked. So he's a 7. He gets a +1 for an 8 here. So he needs a 7 or less to avoid a mechanical issue. He rolls a 6 and passes that check. So that was Kulwicki. And he passes and remains the race leader. Now he's going to face a challenge. And that challenge is coming from 21, Darrell Waltrip. All right, Darrell Waltrip is an 11. Kulwicki's an 11. So this challenge is at 0. He needs a 7-12 to take the lead. He rolls an 8, and we have a new leader in Darrell Waltrip. Pass. And it's Darrell Waltrip is the leader. Okay. So now we're going to see if there's a second contact event. So here at Daytona, that'll happen on a roll of a 9-12. And we roll a 9, so that's also going to be a yes. So there's going to be another contact check. And that now that we're in the closing phase, all of these checks that we may or may not do are centered around the leader. Okay, so it's going to be leader, Waltrip, his adjacent cars, and one random driver that we're going to do contact checks on. So it's Darrell Waltrip. His 12 is Stanley Smith. His 3 o'clock is Richard Petty. His 9 o'clock wraps around to the top, and it's Jimmy Spencer. Or that was his 6 o'clock. His 9 o'clock is Lake Speed. And the random driver is 21. Well, that's Darrell Waltrip, so can't be him. 22, Stanley Smith, he's already in this. Can't be him as well. 25, Ricky Rudd. So remember, we're looking at the yellow mechanical rating, or excuse me, contact rating, and gets a +1 here. You need to be lower than the rating to be safe. If you're equal, you're down several laps, get a yellow marker. If you are higher, you are forced to retire. So Darrell Waltrip is an 8. He becomes a 9. He needs an 8 or less. He rolls a 6 and passes. Pass. Still the race leader. Stanley Smith is a 4. He becomes a 5. He needs a 4 or less. And Stanley makes it with snake eyes. Passes. Richard Petty's a 5. Becomes a 6. Needs a 5 or less. He rolls a 5 and passes. So far, no contact. And we have Jimmy Spencer. Spencer is a 7, becomes an 8, needs a 7 or less. He rolls a 7, and he avoids contact. Passes. Lake Speed is the next one. He's a 7, becomes an 8, needs a 7 or less. Rolls a 3. He passes. And finally, Ricky Rudd. Ricky Rudd's a 10, becomes an 11. He needs a 10 or less. He rolls a 6, so there was no contact. All the checks were passes. And Darrell Waltrip remains the race leader. Now, because we did not have any contact, we are not going to have any pit stops under caution, so we get to skip that phase. And Darrell Waltrip will now face another challenge before we check to see if there's going to be another pit crew check. So that challenge is coming from 16, Jeff Bodine. Jeff Bodine. All right, they're both 11s. So Bodine is challenging at a 0. He needs a 7 to 12. He rolls a 9, and we have a new race leader in Jeff Bodine. So that's a pass. And it's Jeff Bodine, the new race leader. Okay, so now we're going to check to see if, well, there's not, yes, we're going to check to see if there's going to be some, if there's going to be a green flag pit stop, or if there's going to be another pit stop here. And that'll happen on a 7 to 12. And we roll a 4, so that's a no. So that does not happen. And then the final conditional or random check would be to see if there's going to be any late race green flag racing, and that'll happen on an 8 to 12. We roll a 4, so that's also a no. So for this whole period, Jeff Bodine, this whole period near the end, Jeff Bodine has been the leader, and he's going to face a final challenge. And we do that by selecting the highest ranked driver adjacent to the leader. So, and we use the rules of priority. All right, so 12 o'clock wraps around the Lake Speed. He's a 6. 3 o'clock is Jimmy Spencer. So between those two, it's Jimmy Spencer. 6 o'clock is Kyle Petty. He's an 11. So right now it's Bodine and Kyle Petty. And then the 9 o'clock wraps over to Rick Maston. He's a 9. So it ends up Kyle Petty, based on his race rating of 11, is going to be the final challenge. Kyle Petty, who was one of the race leaders or points leaders early on in the season, and who's had some bad luck and been pretty quiet lately, has a chance to pick up a win here at Daytona at the Pepsi 400. Okay. So basically, it's these two drivers, it's near the end of the race. They might be going back and forth here, and Bodine's trying to hold off Kyle Petty. They're both rated an 11, so challenge is a 0. On a 7 to 12, Kyle Petty wins the race, and on a 2 to 6, it's Jeff Bodine holding him off and getting the victory. And he rolls a 5, and Jeff Bodine does hold off Kyle Petty. Kyle Petty fails that final challenge, and the winner of the Pepsi 400 that took place on July 6, 1991 is Jeff Bodine. All right, so we'll take him off the grid. And of course, Kyle Petty, who failed that final challenge, finishes second. It's his best finish in quite some time. All right, so now we need to look at the remaining drivers who were eligible for that final challenge and remove them based on race rating and rules of priority. Okay, so 12 o'clock is Lake Speed. He's a 6. 3 o'clock is Jimmy Spencer. He's an 8. And Rick Mast, who is at 9 o'clock, is a 9. So Rick Mast finishes 3rd. Jimmy Spencer 4th. And Lake Speed 5th. All right, so there's your top 5. So now we're going to go around this outer or bottom groove and remove drivers in order. We're going to go clockwise and remove drivers based on race rating, starting with 11. So it'll be Davey Allison with another good finish. Mark Martin. Sterling Marlin. Rusty Wallace. Alan Kowicki. Bill Elliott. Darrell Waltrip. And that's it for the 11s. So we go to 10. It's Bobby Hamilton. Terry Labonte. Next we go to 9. Brett Bodine. Go to 8. Chad Little. Richard Petty. And the only remaining driver on the bottom groove is Derek Cope. Probably the best finish for Cope this season. Okay, so now we move into this middle area, and we go right in here, and it's Ricky Rudd, Harry Gant, Dale Earnhardt, Ken Schrader, and that's it for the 11s, other than Morgan Shepherd, who's lapped. So now 10s be Bobby Hillin Jr., Dale Jarrett, and that's it for the 10s. 9s, no 9s. 8s would be Ted Musgrave, and then Mickey Gibbs. And it looks like we go all the way down to 2 here, so it'll be Jimmy Means and then Stanley Smith. Now we come right in to the inner groove and go clockwise by race rating. Michael Waltrip, Hut Strickland, Joe Rootman, Dave Marcus, and then the lap driver Morgan Shepherd. And then we take the drivers who did not finish, put them on the bottom of the stack. And here, July 6, 1991, for the Pepsi 400 in a replay. Race winner is Jeff Bodine, then Kyle Petty, Rick Mast, Jimmy Spencer, and Lake Speed. That's your top 5. Rounding out the top 10 be Davey Allison, Mark Martin, Sterling Marlin, Rusty Wallace, and Alan Kowicki. So there you have your top 10. So Bobby Hamilton does not finish in the top 10 this time around. I'm going to guess, now without looking at lead laps and doing the points, Davey Allison is certainly going to pass Bobby Hamilton. Will he be the race leader when all is said and done? Hard to say. Probably. Could be Jeff Bodine, too. He's up there. Or Rusty. Well, anyway, getting ahead of myself. There's your top 10. That's going to do it for this race. The next one, race 16, will be back at Pocono. And I'll be back with that after I go through my little cycle. I don't know if any of you have noticed, but I've kind of limited my channel to right now doing just 3 projects and kind of rotating through them. Doing my Stratomatic Baseball Old Timer Kings Tournament every other video. I might occasionally, or I will occasionally, throw in a one-off thing. I haven't done that in a little while, but the next video might be one of those. But anyway, that's going to do it for this episode. If you hung around with me, I appreciate it. Thanks for visiting the dugout today. If you just popped in, I appreciate that as well. And I'll be back again in the near future with another video. And until then, take care.